It can't be perfect. I should change that to words. I can't be perfect. I'm talking about perfection today, and I think it's one of the great disabilities that many of us are suffering from in life. And actually, I don't mean to blame it all on Jesus, but it started back then in Matthew, the 5th chapter, Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus said to everybody, "Be ye therefore perfect." Oh, man. If this is supposed to be inspiring, it was hard. It was hard for me. We all grow up with these ideas of what perfect is. When I was a little kid, we used to have these Breakfast of Champions on the front of the Wheaties boxes. And we're supposed to say, "Hey, son, I'm supposed to go up and look like this." I was 120 pounds, 6 feet tall. I had to run around the shower to get wet, turn sideways, and I was invisible. I couldn't possibly be anything like those guys on the Wheaties box. And all of us grow up with these external images of what perfection is. And we have the world telling us what we're supposed to do to be perfect. And when Jesus said, "Be ye therefore perfect," a lot of us have taken it very seriously to try to be absolutely perfect according to those external standards. But here's the thing, folks. It is a big lie. The big lie of perfection is nobody will love me until I'm perfect. And then the truth is I won't either. We all have that little voice in our head. And you know the one I'm talking about, where no matter what anybody says to you, like if they say, "Oh, you are so beautiful, or you're so talented, and I love that thing you're wearing, and you look so nice, you're just so nice," there's a little voice going, "Yeah, but if they really knew what you were like." You know that one? I don't have to raise your hand or anything, but as Edwin would say, poke your neighbor, because, yeah, you know who that is. We all have that little voice inside, and that's part of our ego that just keeps us beat down. So I really want to talk about, what did Jesus mean to be perfect? How can you possibly be perfect in a world where there are so many conflicting messages about what we're supposed to be in the first place? And then on top of all that, when unity says things like, "Oh, you're perfect, it's perfect just the way it is," what is that? It doesn't feel perfect. It doesn't look perfect. How can we say that? So I'm going to answer some of that, hopefully, for you today, because my goal is that you will leave here feeling, guess, perfect. But you'll really believe it this time. It's not just like, "Oh, yeah, they said I'm perfect." Yeah. No. I'm really perfect. Okay? Yeah. Okay, good. To be perfect is to act as someone else has defined you. Isn't that lovely? But to be perfectly human is to be exactly who you are. And who is that? You see, I'm believing that each one of us has this kind of a spiritual DNA in us. There's a piece of us, when the Bible says you were created in the image and likeness of God, there is a piece of us that's like a pattern, a perfect soul pattern. If you were Hindu, you would call it the Atman. It's that perfect piece of soul for you, that Brahman part of your consciousness, and that piece is perfect. That is untarnished. It is not, we are not our thoughts. We have thoughts. We have feelings, but we're not our feelings. We have emotions, but we're not those things. But we are that perfect pattern that is planted in us. And I believe that when Jesus said, "Be perfect," what he's really saying is, be that perfect idea that God gave to you of who you are. That's what I believe was meant by being perfect. And it's a struggle. This is a conflict for us. Charles Fillmore is the co-founder of Unity, and he says it this way. He talked about it in a book called Keep a True Lent. He said, "The question is frequently asked, why? If God is perfect and man is his likeness and image, should there be imperfection in man? The answer is that there is no imperfection in man. He is perfect potentiality proving itself. In the course of bringing forth this perfection, there are processes he must go through." Okay, that's the little part down here. Jesus said, "Be ye therefore perfect," and go through all this stuff to get there. See those little processes that we must go through? That's life. Remember I talked last week about the story of the prodigal son, how he had taken his father's money and he went off to Vegas or wherever he went, and he squandered on riotous living and just pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization before he realized where he belonged and he came home. That piece where he's going out there, that's his process. you see. That's part and parcel of what was important for him, kind of a recipe for his life that brings him fully back around until he realized the perfect pattern of who he was. So what I am contending for you today is, because that is part of the perfect recipe of his life, that in every single stage of that journey of his, he was, as Margie said, in the right place, at the right time, right then. Because it was part of what was needed to bring him around. Do you understand? So we all have this kind of recipe in our life, and it's different for everybody. Every single person has that spiritual implant of a DNA. So the question is, what do you know what it is? Are you aware of it? And then you might say, well, where do I find it? What book? What chapter? What gospel is it in? It isn't. It's right here. And you know how we access things in here? Together? Prayer, meditation, and good work. This is how we know what's going on inside here. Is through prayer and meditation. Oh, thank you. My lovely assistants have prepared my stage for me. I wanted to share something with you as a way of trying to explain how we can be in the process of life and still be perfect, even though we're not at the end yet. Do you understand? The prodigal son, even though when he's out there, it's still perfect. And so what I thought to do is to share with you a little bit of my childhood. I like to cook, and I learned to cook from my mom. We grew up with 5 boys in our family, and there was nobody else to help, and I loved to do it. Besides that, you get to eat everything first. I want to share with you the very first thing I learned to cook. And those of you who know me will not be surprised that it is sugar cookies. Sugar cookies are incredibly spiritual, as you will find out. First and foremost, what is incredibly important is I have, guess what? A recipe. This is what we must all know, our recipe. So just imagine, this is our life. And now we have a recipe of what we're going to do with it. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do with this, we're going to put in some organic butter. Just a little. Now I want you to remember that this my mother and I learned to cook back in the 50s. So we didn't even know what health was back in the 50s. So just never mind if those of you that get a little disturbed, oh, you're putting butter in there? No. Not only butter, but some white organic sugar. Just a little. Now, it's all doing something here very important. I have a recipe. I'm making sugar cookies. But I'm looking at this. It doesn't look like sugar cookies. This thing is spinning around, which is lovely. Some of the sugar is stuck in there. We can do that. It's going through what Charles Fillmore would call a process. Oh. Now, it's just getting all turned up there, and it looks like it's done, but it's not done. For those of you that know how to cook, especially if you know how to do cookies, I'm at a very important stage here. It's called creaming the butter and sugar. Who knows about that, Bev? You know, all the cooks, all the women raise their hands. See, guys, you have no clue what has to go on in the kitchen. You have to cream the butter and sugar together. It's an important process. If you don't do that, then the cookies won't fluff up and be nice and fluffy and bright. They'll be all kind of flat and icky, like cardboard. So it doesn't look like anything's happening. How many times in life have you been spinning around doing something saying, it doesn't look like anything's happening? I'm not getting anywhere. I'm just creaming butter and sugar. I don't understand this. You see, there's a reason for some of the ways that things happen in our life. We have to go through those processes. There were reasons that the Jewish people wandered in the desert for 40 years, and it's not because they were lost. It's not because they were led by men who refused to ask for directions. They wandered in the desert for 40 years because there were things that they had to learn when they were in that experience that they could not have learned any other way. So I'm creaming butter. So maybe someday I'll ask you, how you doing this morning? You go, I'm creaming butter. And I'll know that you're creaming butter right now. I'll know that you have no clue of why this is going on, but you know it's important. So here's what's going to happen. Butter is creaming. It's fantastic. Oh, It's looking good. Oh, it's getting all nice and fluffy. This is so healthy. So, okay, so what happens is, you can't see it, but it's like, oh, you could frost a cake with this right now and be totally good. So it's important that we went through that process. You understand? So this butter and sugar, I'm making a cookie, and it's all creamed up. It's not a cookie, but it's perfect right now. This is what it's supposed to be, and it's perfect right now what it's going to be. So now I'm going to take one egg. Now I grieved over this egg because I had a perfect dozen, and now I had to take one out. It's not perfect anymore. And now I have to actually break it. But it's perfect like it is. I don't want to break it. Why should I have to break it? But I have to break it. If I put it in there like this, it will not be good. So I break the egg. Sometimes, when we're cooking cookies or anything, you have to break something to make it work. Sometimes in life, you may have to break up a relationship. You may have to break up a job. You may have to break up some place. You have to break something in order to fill the recipe. So I'm doing cookies. I've got broken egg, and I'm happy about it now. I like vanilla, so I'm going to put some vanilla in there, just a little. Now, here's something I haven't talked about before today, but you know what? There's a lot of things I really like. I take great pleasure in many different things. And I'm tempted to put them in my cookies. I love craisins, I love raisins, I love coconut, I like celery, cucumbers, spinach, tofu. But those are things that I like. And right now, I'm making cookies. So it's important that I follow the recipe. I'll have to leave those other things out. Now, this is my recipe, okay? Your recipe may be making baba ganoush. You may be making, I don't know, lasagna, vegetable lasagna, stir-fried green beans. I don't know, but it's going to be different. So here I am. Look at this. Oh, my gosh. Look at this. Oh, you see that? Look at that. It's perfect. Right now, it's perfect. So what I add now, a little baking soda, a little baking powder. We're going to get all this stirred up. Now, we add flour. Now, you're supposed to do this kind of slowly, but I'm in a hurry, so I'm just going to dump this in. You should be wearing a mask when you do this. Okay, it's getting close now. It doesn't look like cookies yet. It looks like kitty litter. Now that's important. Because sometimes as we're fulfilling and finding out the recipe in our life, it looks like kitty litter. And it's going to be cookies. Come on, you can do it. You can. Oh, fabulous. Okay, here we go. All right, come on, come on, come on. All right. Okay. That's good. Now, what I'll do is, I'll take a little bit of this. I have to make sure it's right first. Oh, man, that is so good. Roll it into a little ball. I'll put it on a baking sheet. I'll take a cup, dip it in some sugar, and I'll squash it out, put it in the oven, bake it up. And you know what? I'll have cookies. And they'll be perfect. Now, they're perfect, even though at all the different stages here, they didn't look perfect. But I could say with absolute certainty, because I'm following this recipe, that at every moment when I was doing this, it was perfect. Did you understand that? Did you see how that worked? So what I'm going to suggest to you is that every moment in your life, as you are unfolding the recipe of your own spiritual DNA and what you are supposed to be, even though it's not yet cookies in your life, whatever it is in that moment, if our consciousness and attention is there and we are connected to what we're supposed to be doing, it is perfect. And we can say it's perfect. It's not easy to do. I want you to know how you can know it's perfect. Number one is to be a compassionate observer in every moment. When I'm doing all this and I'm looking at what I'm doing, or we're doing anything in our life as it begins to unfold, look at it with compassion from an observer's point of view. Look at it with love. Second thing is to know the truth. Know the truth, the recipe of who you are and what you're here about. Know that ultimately so that no matter what else happens, no matter what it looks like or smells like or tastes like, it's ultimately, unfolding the way it's supposed to. And the last one, remember that God is perfect love. And you're in this process. You have been loved through a process. You're not going to be led to make something that you don't want. And that's hard when you're in love. There are things, like I say, you have to break eggs. You have to give up putting raisins and coconut and cucumbers in your sugar cookies. And sometimes that's hard. Ram Dass is a great spiritual leader that lives on Maui. And he talks about how we can give up things, a good way to give up some things as we go through this recipe, so that I'm not trying to make somebody else's stuff. I'm making the one that's for me. He said, renouncing the attachments and desires that are holding you back can be really difficult when you're trying to do it in an achievement-oriented, driven sort of way, the way that perfect people always do. On the other hand, giving things up is incredibly easy in the presence of love. They just dissolve. The last thing I want to share with you about the power of love to dissolve these things is the last story, the last part of the story I shared last week on the prodigal son. And you all know that story. I've explained it already. There's a whole other part to that story that you hardly ever hear of. And to me, it's incredibly important because I think it pertains to about 50% of the people who are here. About half of you here are the people who were the prodigal. You went out into the world, you lived the riotous living, and you've come to your senses, and now you're showing up here on Sunday. I know half of you are, and I'm going to ask you to be really brave. Would that half be willing to raise your hand and say, yes, that's me? I'm not going to ask you to come forward. Okay, everybody look around. These are the party people. These are the people that know how to have fun. Okay. All the rest of you, you are what I call the GTS people. The goody two-shoes people. You would never run away from home because that's not what the perfect child does. You would stay home. You would do everything exactly right. And that's the other half of the story that you never hear about. And that's half of you. You don't have to raise your hand because you'd be worried about how to do it perfectly. Is this high enough? Not high enough? Should I be up like this? Wave. Oh, that's high. Okay. Who's looking? Oh, my God. The older son was the GTS son, the goody two-shoes. He didn't run away from home. He wouldn't dare. He was doing everything exactly right, everything the way he was supposed to be doing it. And so when he finally got confronted with the big lie, remember the big lie is that no matter how perfect you are, you think you're going to be loved? It's a big lie. And he saw the big lie. And you know where he saw it? He saw it when his younger brother, who broke every single rule there was, ran away from home, lost all of his money, came back after losing 35 pounds and coming out of rehab. He comes home to his parents, and they throw a party, and they love him. And he broke all the rules and didn't do anything right. How dare they love him? He was mad. And in the 28th verse of the 15th chapter of Luke, it says, the older brother stalked off in an angry sulk and refused to join in. He was speechlessly mad. I love this part then. It says, the father, who is represented by God, says, came out and tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't listen. Oh, yeah. Nobody listens when you're right, when you're in the rightness of your anger. I mean, you don't need to listen when you're right. You don't need to pray when you're right either. The son said, look how many years I've stayed here serving you, never giving you one moment of grief. He's perfect. Not one single moment. What a perfect child. But have you ever thrown a party for me and my friends? I love this part. Then he says, then this son of yours, not like he's my brother or anything, but this son of yours, who has thrown away your money on whores, shows up and you go all out with a feast. When we get confronted with the lie, it's disturbing. With the lie that I've been perfect. And it's like he's saying, why have I been so perfect with all these things? Why couldn't I have just been myself all this time? And then, if you don't remember anything else today, if you don't remember the cookies, if you don't remember the perfection, I want you to remember what the Father God says to him at the end, because it is a message for you. His father said, son, you don't understand. You are with me always, and I am with you always, and all that I have is yours. See, we don't have to be perfect because we are already supremely and ultimately loved. All of the things that we could try to do would not make a difference because God is already here. And we are already with God. And everything that God has is ours already. If we could just know that in every moment, we would be perfect. Would you close your eyes with me for just a moment, please? I know it's difficult. We've been so trained that we have to earn love. And to have it be so freely given is strange and foreign. But I want you to know you are absolutely supremely loved, and there is nothing you could ever do that would cause God to love you more, and nothing you could ever do that would cause God to love you less. So in these quiet moments, I invite you just to listen and to understand when God says to you, I am always with you and you are always with me. And all that I have is yours. When we are in relationship like that, it is perfect. Listen. Listen to God now in the sacred and holy silence.